So about halfway to our number. So let's give them one extra minute if that's okay, everybody. Welcome on this great Thursday. And here they come.
Dr. Pruitt-Adams, where are you?
Right here. Oh,
No, or your background. I'm like, or is that just a background?
it's a Zoom background. It's Women in History Month. And so I have a couple of Zoom backgrounds, and I really loved this one. So I just carried it over from Black History Month.
I love it. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
That maybe you're in a museum having the call.
I wish.
Yeah, right. I was going to say we all wish, right?
One day, soon.
One day. Hopefully in the very near future.
Yes.
I gotta say, I kind of miss the cookies from the in-person community council gatherings.
Oh. Well, we'll have to send you a pack of cookies for the next meeting.
Crazy.
We kind of missed it too.
All right, well, let's go and get started. 7:31. Welcome everybody to the March meeting of this incredible council, community council. Hope you've had a great beginning of the month of March already and enjoyed some warmer weather. Not so much today, but we sure enjoy it when the sun's shining, and we've earned it. That's for sure. So I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order, and would like to offer for the first order of business. I'd like to ask for somebody to make a motion to accept the minutes from our February 4th meeting.
So
Motion
moved. Okay. Excuse me.
Got the first one there. And then let's go. I need a second, please.
Second.
Thank you very much. All in favor of accepting these minutes, say aye or thumbs up.
Aye.
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 And any opposed by the same sign? We'll let the record show the February 4th minutes have been accepted. And we'll move quickly to this evening. We've got a lot in store for you. So gonna go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Pruitt-Adams or Mr. Johnson for the superintendent report.
So good evening, everyone. I'm going to try to be brief because, as Chuck indicated, there's a lot of information to share. So I'm sure everyone knows we're back into full hybrid. And as you saw in my Monday memo, I will say to you, it is wonderful. Just the feel of having people in the building is amazing. It's such a rush when you see someone in the hall, one of the students, one of the staff members. It just is a wonderful feeling. As you saw in the Monday memo, we are revisiting our numbers and giving parents the opportunity to opt in. Who were originally remote, you now have the opportunity to opt in. And those parents who were remote, who were hybrid, who have chosen not to come, we're giving them an opportunity to also, by the 15th of March, to let us know if they plan to send their child. If not, then that opens up some additional spaces. I would like to say that the live screening program is going well. However, it's going so well that in the recent week, we are starting to see our number of cases, students, people we have to refer to go get screened. We're seeing those increase. And so if you choose to, you can go to our website and look at our dashboard And on that dashboard, it actually includes the positive COVID cases, and those are diagnoses. And as of today, this morning, we had 8 students and 2 staff members. The positive saliva screener, which is, it's not a diagnostic tool, it's a screener. And we had 1 student this morning and no staff members on there. Those who are awaiting test results or alternative diagnosis that may be having some symptoms. This morning we have 4 students and 2 adults. And those who are asymptomatic due to close contact, this morning we had 45 students and 4 staff. So we're watching our numbers very closely just to make sure. I'm checking to see those things that are epidemiologically connected. And you've probably, if your kids play sports, any of the sports that are going on right now, you may have received a call for some of those teams to quarantine for having been in close contact. As I say, we update our website every day. And so I encourage you to check it. It is our hope that if we are able to bring new kids in, we will do that after spring break. Last but not least, we have successfully hosted 2 vaccine clinics. And so any employees of the district, whether they are certified, home on accommodations, substitutes, monitors, consultants, we did 2 clinics, one on February 13th and one on February 20th for the first dose. Second dose clinics start this week. And so Saturday, the people who got their first vaccine on February 13th will receive their second dose. And those of us who got our first vaccine on February 20th, on February 13th, we will receive our second dose. So stay tuned on the status of when we'll bring additional students back on site. That concludes the superintendent's report.
We have a couple of minutes if there's any comments or questions at this time.
I have a question, Dr. Pruitt-Adams. The cases, it's interesting that the cases are going up. So I think it's 2-part. Are we thinking that people are kind of lowering their guard a little bit outside of school? And then are any of the cases that we're seeing linked within the school epidemiologically?
Okay, so what we know as of today, there are 3 that are epidemiologically connected, and it's not considered an outbreak until there are 5 that are epidemiologically connected. We are consistently in touch with the Oak Park Department of Public Health, so they know our status. Once we saw the connection, then we notified them, and so there's been ongoing conversation. There's one we don't know yet that may be connected, but we don't have those results back. But I'm trying to go back to your first question. I answered your second question first, and your first question was
just, do we think it's due to people lowering their guard? Do we even have a sense of that?
I would be making an assumption. We were told there might have been a party either sometime last week or so, but that's just hearsay at this point. So we would be making an assumption.
So that collaboration be able to show.
I couldn't understand you, Judy.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was a false alarm. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I have a question. What's happening with staff and teachers that maybe don't want to get vaccinated? How's the district approaching that?
By law, legally, what we were told by our legal counsel and legal counsel for ISB, that we should not mandate that teachers be vaccinated. And so it was a choice. As I said, any staff member who wanted to be vaccinated, on site with us, we allowed it. However, some of our employees chose to get their vaccinations before we allowed it, before we did ours, but we could not mandate it. In our MOA with teachers, the agreement we had was if they agreed to the saliva screen and contracted COVID, then the district would give them the days that they needed to be out in quarantine. However, if they chose not to participate and contracted COVID, then they would have to use their own sick time. But with vaccinations, we did not mandate it. But I will say quite a large number of our staff took advantage.
Yeah, I saw that. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you for taking that extra time, Dr. Pruitt-Adams. And I might just say during this meeting and during the presentation that you make sure that you're muted while the presentation is going on, just so it can keep the distractions down. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over. We're going to hear from District 97. Venus, are you with us this evening? Okay, District 90.
Hi.
Judy? Thank you, Judy.
Hi. We are planning on extending our school day. We're going through some discussions and planning for how to extend our school day so kids can get more, the kids participating in the in-person program can get some more, a longer day, and that will, but one of the barriers to this is trying to figure out a lunch solution. And this will also make the remote learning day a little bit longer as well. So there's plenty of discussion going on in our district about that. And that's really one of the main topics going on.
Excellent. Thank you, Judy. District 200, Matt?
Hi. Hey, Chuck. Thanks. So Dr. Pruitt-Adams covered obviously some of the most key points, and I would just say that the school board at our last meeting last week, we actually met inside the school for the first time as a board since last March, and so there were 4 of us that were there on site, and 3 of whom decided to remain remote. And so that, I'm not sure if we're going to continue to do that. I'm not sure what kind of feedback others have given or whatever, but I know that our tech staff did a great job to do the best they could. It's very difficult circumstances, and the audio isn't as clean as this Zoom call, for instance, but dealing with a lot of just different issues about people's different locations and sound and sight and so on. So I just want to let you all know that those meetings also are public for people to come. There's limited capacity, and so I don't even know if we had anyone that actually came to our last meeting, which isn't much different from pre-pandemic times, oftentimes. But our next meeting is a week from tonight at the Committee of the Whole on the 11th. And so, but kudos to our staff. Also, I appreciate the flexibility in the adaptive nature of what Dr. Pruitt-Adams and her team are doing to really reassess in terms of the cohorts for students opting in and the families opting in. So I think that's really important. We're never going to please everyone, and we're lucky if we please 49% of people, but I appreciate that. As Dr. Pruitt-Adams said, also there's so much changing and so much online all the time, so I will not take up more time, cover things that people maybe can find online, but if there's any questions anyone has now or later, please feel free to ask me, and if I can't answer it, then I can certainly try to funnel it to whoever could.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. We appreciate it. Well, let's keep moving on. We're doing good this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Johnson for this month's report. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chuck. So I'm going to share my screen here to get things started here. Make sure I'm doing that right. So I want to appreciate the fact that everybody last month, Chuck, we were emailing back and forth to try to find a way to make some pivots to last month's agenda, and you were able to do so. So I really appreciate that, and everybody being flexible there. And so what we went back and forth a little bit to figure out exactly how we wanted to adjust our calendar of topics moving forward for the semester. But what we decided was, let's take what we were going to do in February, let's talk about it this month. And then as we move through the subsequent months, we'll figure out how we're going to handle some of those topics. And so, so what we have here is mostly what we're going to do in February, and there's some additional information that we'll be adding as we move along. Kind of keep it, all right. Let me say that there are two topics in here. First, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the world of special education. And then from there, we'll give an update on some of our freshman curriculum work. And so Shalima Francois Blue, that I don't know if this crew has had the chance to meet yet, is here. She is our executive director of special education. So she is here to take us for the first bit of this information, and I'll turn it over to her right now.
Thanks a lot, Greg, for the introduction, and thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet all of you and see all of you today. And I agree, it's so great to see the sun. It's something about seeing the sun that just brightens your spirit. Greg, do you want me to share my screen with the presentation, or you got it?
I got it.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yep.
So just wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to take you through kind of a year in review up to this point as to where we are with special education since the start of the year, or July rather, up until now. If we can go to the next slide. Thank you very much. So just kind of packaging it very succinctly and giving you kind of just a comprehensive snapshot as to what we've been working on this year in special education. We've been focusing on making sure that we were optimizing our ongoing staff, student, and parent and caregiver engagement, making sure that communication has been two-way and not one-way, making sure that we've been able to engage staff, students, and parents, not just by way of surveys, but actually setting aside time to speak with them virtually, setting aside time for listening sessions, communicating with staff weekly through weekly memos, all of our diverse learners, the staff of our diverse learners, including special education teachers, support staff members, our clinicians, social workers, psychs, related service providers, and also some of our staff that have joined us that have been very, very good at creating a pathway for some of our diverse learners to come on site a little sooner rather than later in our learning labs. They are learning lab facilitators. We also wanted to make sure that I needed to make sure that as a new executive director at OPRF and in the Oak Park community, Oak Park and River Forest community, I wanted to make sure parents knew that they can hear from me about the work that we're doing in the district that's impacting special ed overall. And so having 4-point monthly updates into parents has been very, very helpful. I know sometimes some of the communication that they receive is not always what they want to hear about how our students are transitioning sooner rather than later to in-person learning. But I did find that in some of my listening sessions called Less Chat, the first one that I did, parents just felt like, knowing something is better than not being on pause. So that's been helpful. Our special education FAQ, how do we merge or transition our diverse learners into being back in the building with hybrid learning? A lot of our staff had some very, very, very good questions. We wanted to make them feel like they could get them answered in a very expeditious way, but then also create a way where we can keep updating them on changes with hybrid learning. The other thing that we've been making sure that we've been keeping a good pulse on is looking at previous practice and up until now to kind of highlight and identify what's actually still needed to keep us evolving in special education at OPRF. We've done some student outreach. We wanted to make sure that we continue with student and staff outreach as safely as we can. During the warmer months, we wanted to make sure that we showed our appreciation outdoors for staff by having them pull up. We do have a good vibes pull-up committee that we would let them drive up, celebrate them, playing music, giving out swag bags, keeping everyone encouraged and connected, although we were still remote. We did spend a lot of time examining how do we create and utilize a very objective evidence-based protocol that tells us which students should be transitioning first and how. It's called a severity matrix of services tool that other states and other state education agencies and districts have been using, where we've been looking at the severity level of services and why students that need more intensive support may have to require a closer examination in how they actually transition to in-person learning. We also are spending a lot of time being engaged with staff, listening to parents, and making sure that we're looking at how our the focus areas, things that we're focusing on in SPED, need to align to our overall district strat plan. We know that we needed to do some work just over the years and looking at how do we have a very data-driven process for our continuum of services. So we did make sure that we spent some time from fall up until now outlining our special education continuum services that details how do we make decisions about student placement outside of just a general IEP meeting based off of their level of need and what that data needs to show us and how do we make those decisions, both from the least restrictive all the way up to the most restrictive settings. We also are looking at our professional growth. What are the things that we need to focus our attention on to improve our practice and creating more of a job embedded coaching process for our staff. We did a special education needs assessment professional development survey in the beginning of the year. We got some really great feedback, thoughtful feedback from all of our staff in the department. Out of that needs assessment survey, we identified 4 core areas that we're going to be focusing on. We also are starting in the fall of 2021, having a strong look at how do we create a special education division strategic plan. So the fall will be the beginning of us inviting parents, other community stakeholders, and staff to participate in our strategic planning process for the division. That is the beginning fall of 2021. And then the last thing is by the beginning of spring 2021, once that strategic plan has been done for the division, we've outlined our core beliefs, our vision and mission for the division. How does it align to our overall district vision and mission and goals? We're going to be also creating and spending some time on making sure that we're more consistent, timely, and efficient in creating policies and procedures for the division as well. I think the other thing that I think I'll be remiss if I didn't mention is that we are making sure that we are giving some very close attention to how we are currently structured within the department, within the division in terms of staffing. We want to make sure that we are staying not only ahead of or timely in how we're making decisions and how we service kids, but there's no delay in our provision of services and how we're implementing services and programming for kids. So we are doing some staffing restructuring. It does not mean that we are getting rid of staff. It does not mean that we're not taking into account the value that all of our staff bring. It does mean that we are looking at really becoming much stronger in how we're evolving within the structure of administrative oversight and also support to staff and students to maximize how we're serving them year to year. I know that was a lot.
Okay, thank you. We'll roll on, and I think we'll definitely open this up as we move on, I think is the approach we'll take, unless Chuck, there's a different, I don't know, style you want to do for the presentation. Good? Okay. All right, so let me move on.
Greg, can I just ask, are we going to have a chance to ask questions about this later?
Yes.
The special ed?
That's what I was referring to just a moment ago. So I think we'll move on and go through the presentation and then open it up to questions about any part of it at the end. Does that work, Heather?
Works for me. Thank you.
Yeah, Greg, can I make a comment though very quickly?
Yeah.
About that, when Ms. Francois Blue mentioned we're making some restructuring, I don't want anybody to leave the meeting thinking that the board has already approved it. It's coming forward to the board next week.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the next step is to give a kind of an update on some of the work that we've been doing with our freshman curriculum. And before I go into this topic, let me first kind of reintroduce to at least some of you Dr. Laura Fiorenza, who is at least in the center of my screen. She's our Director of Student Learning. This is her second year in the district, and I think you were last with Community Council roughly a year ago. Is that right, Laura? Yeah. So we'll be tag teaming these slides, sometimes on the same slides, sometimes from slide to slide. And so just to put this in context, this has been something that our community has spent some time discussing and talking about, and our school has spent some time talking about for the better part of the last 18 months or so, and that is our stated plans in the district to detrack our freshman curriculum. It has evolved quite a bit since we first discussed this last September with the community. And so we'll give you an update on kind of our approach to the whole thing and give you a bit of a foreshadowing of what's coming down the road with this work, okay? So first, that we just simply want to mention, I'm not going to go in great detail here. Some of the, you have access to these slides, and some of these are linked. So if you want to learn more about anything that's on here, you'll see these links. Usually I put them in the heading. But throughout this work, we partnered for the better part of actually midway through last year. So again, about a year now with REL. Who's here in Chicago, and they've been really invaluable for us. And I think the best way to kind of describe them as a partner in our work is they're research-based practitioners who have been really invaluable thought partners for us and our team. Both they meet with us collectively to help think about our planning. They meet with us individually to help kind of challenge our thinking about kind of smaller projects that pertain to any one of us in the district. And you can see on this slide here just kind of an outline of their approach with us. Okay. And this next slide is Lori's. Go ahead.
Yes. So in addition to working with REL, we are working with Lisa Westman, who is a consultant. And as you can see here, specifically, we focused on differentiation and coaching. Student-driven differentiation is a book that Lisa Westman wrote. And so we've been very focused on differentiation. She's working specifically with our instructional coaches to build their capacity. A few of the things we're focused on is true coaching cycles, setting measurable goals, collecting data, using that data to drive our instructional practices. More will be coming to the board later in the spring on our shift in instructional coaching practices. But most recently, we have engaged Ms. Westman in some support with our curriculum design. We are particularly focused on our learning intentions, our success criteria, and how we formatively assess students. And so we've been diving deeply with her into those things in multiple group settings. So we're very excited about that partnership.
Yeah. And again, you can find out more. I believe this link is active there at the top. So as you go through. The final partnership that we have, kind of collaborator with us, we reached out last semester and have spent some time talking not only with Carol Ann Tomlinson at the University of Virginia, but also a lot of, she's kind of tapped us into a network of folks who are doing some quality work throughout the country, really. And she's at the University of Virginia. She leads this Teach Up for Excellence Institute over there. And so really she's been a good critical partner at various steps along the process, but has also most importantly tapped us into practitioners, like I said, around the state. So anyway, that's the end of kind of the partnerships that we've developed along the way to kind of challenge and push our thinking. So what are we doing and why are we doing this thing? All right, so this desire to detract, this notion to detract. It is really to achieve two goals at the same time, something we absolutely believe is doable at OPRF and in this community. And it's holding excellence and equity at the same time as absolutely essential goals for us at OPRF. And so what you see here are these are taken from the state criteria for what exemplary schools are, according to the state evaluative formula under EBF. And so a few things about these goals. Number one, these are the academic goals that they set for schools. There's a similar kind of flight of goals that they have for middle schools and elementary districts. But also that these aren't kind of threshold criteria. These are the categories through which they rank the entire state. And so far, OPRF, according to this ranking system, we have not been in the top 10%. We've done well, we've been very close. We have not been in the top 10% across the state. And so this is right now our goal as a school district, to get there in the top 10%. In order to realize that goal, it's really a two-step process. We need racially proportionate outcomes that place us within that top 10%. And that has to be realizable across our demographic spectrum in the district. And so anyway, you can see how these criteria are. I'm going to refer to these later on when I talk about the logic model and how kind of we backwards map from these goals as we're moving through our change process. But until we hit this goal, this is definitely our focus right now. Okay. And so the next two slides are kind of the accountability guide that we've set for ourselves as a school. It's the map that we've drawn out for ourselves for how we are going to achieve those outcomes that you see on this slide. And so it's laid out into kind of, this is really just one grid for us, but for the purpose of the presentation, we've mapped it out on this slide for first, what are the strategies? What are the inputs that we are going to push into our system to help make the positive change we're looking for? And you can see number one, our reference to our detracking work. By the fall of 21, complete those plans, and we'll be presenting those to the board in the fall of 2021 for their approval to be implemented the following year. We have a differentiated professional development model that Dr. Fiorenzo is going to talk to a little bit more thoroughly in just a little bit. And then we're also spending a lot of time talking about our GPA practices and our grading practices in the school and how those work for all of our students. In fact, just a little bit later this month, we'll be presenting to the Board of Education an analysis of our academic program index, which is the process that our school district does use to create a weighted GPA for all of our students. It's a pretty unique process to OPRF. It's fascinating, actually, and we'll be talking about that in a week from tonight, actually. But as you move to the right on this slide, you'll kind of see the capacity indicators, those types of professional practices that we want to see our staff and our faculty exhibiting as we move forward, and then how we are going to hold ourselves accountable to those professional practices by producing various bits of evidence. You see that in the far right-hand column. Again, I'm not going to go into great detail about any one of these, at least right now, unless some questions come, but just kind of explaining how it's mapped out. And then on this next slide, how do those adult behaviors and those goals we've set for ourselves as an institution translate to our students, which is the only reason to do this work. And you see kind of the indicators of success outlined here. Again, kind of paralleling that previous slide, those types of kind of student behaviors and experiences that we want them to have. And then how does that translate to metric for our students? Something I want to highlight. On this slide, we have broken down our metrics. We have broken down our metrics here into two categories. One are those kind of needs, those for the entire school, making sure that we are setting a high bar for our institution overall. And then how are we going to make sure while we are doing that same work, addressing the inequities? So again, trying to hold at the same time this notion of excellence and equity. So as we move forward, we're going to talk a little bit now about one part of this change process, which is the designing of the curriculum itself. And Lori's going to be speaking to that at this point. So Lori, go ahead.
Yep, so each of our teams have a curriculum writing team that has been assembled. In 2019-20, they met every month. After January, we allotted them some extra time as the divisions felt that they needed to gather, and the work was intense and deep, and so we allotted them extra time. In 2021, they were meeting twice during the semester, the first semester, and then in semester 2, we have actually increased those meeting times as well. Since we have gone hybrid, the structure of our day has shifted, and so releasing staff for an entire day just has not been feasible. It would impact student instructional time, and we definitely don't want to take away any more time from teacher-student engagement or interaction. So we are doing smaller bits of curriculum writing with our team. So it's going to take a few more sessions as opposed to a single day. Our focus is primarily this scope and sequence that you see here. What are our priority standards? So about 8 to 12 key standards, key skills that we want students at each division, each department to learn and master. What are the learning intentions? So how will we teach and instruct that? What is the success criteria? How will we know that students have mastered the skills that we're asking them to master? And finally, in what way will we assess formatively over time that students are learning and growing according to those skills? The wonderful thing about this is that this brings an alignment, a consistency to our curriculum within divisions that possibly hasn't been in each division to the extent that it will be moving forward. So we're very excited about that. Next slide, please. So our focus in these curriculum teams is to meet the needs of all of our students. And so the very first way that we are focusing on doing that is aligning our curriculum to the honors level standards. Below, you'll see some products. So some ways that each division is doing that. I'm not going to read all of them to you. As you have these slides, you can look at those, but these are just a sample. It's not all of them. It's just a small sample of some of the products that have been produced by our writing teams. Next slide, please. In order for us to align our curriculum to that honors level standard, we need to make sure that our teachers have the adequate professional development, professional learning, so that they can learn and grow as well. Below, you see some examples of, by division, some of those things. I'll just highlight two of them. The English division is working with the instructional coaches on reading instruction. So that's very intentional work that we are embedding in our curriculum writing process. And the science department has been doing field study work with BSCS and has yielded some fabulous results that we're very excited about. Next slide. In order to meet the needs of all of our students, we've talked a number of times about the need for and the importance of differentiating our instruction, which means that we meet each student where they are. Now, how we do that, you see some products here. I won't read all of them again, but problem-based learning, offering choice, individualizing our learning opportunities are some ways that we can differentiate for students. Differentiation is primarily focused on encouraging students to set goals based on where they are in the learning process relative to a skill, and then working with the teacher to scaffold instruction so that the student is able to achieve their personal learning goal. In order to do that, of course, lots and lots of professional development. So please know this is a very, very small sample of what our teachers have been engaged with. We've been working with Lisa Westman, specifically with our coaches, to build the capacity of our coaches so that we can expand our ability to support 200 plus teachers with this concept of differentiation. So very job embedded, coaches coaching other teachers, going into their classrooms, setting goals, offering feedback. That has been going on for quite some time. Lisa Westman was our keynote speaker at the beginning of the year. All of our coaches have been reading student-driven differentiation, which is this process of student goal setting and student reflection, students monitoring their own growth and how teachers support that. And finally, impact cycle, which is very specific to improving how we coach so that it is data-driven. So we set goals with our teachers and we monitor that. So it's very different and very intentional work. Next slide, please. Finally, we are most focused on that data-driven decision-making. You've heard me mention data a few times now relative to students, relative to teachers. So you can see some of the products listed here. I'll highlight our multi-tiered system of support. This is probably one of the things I am most proud of that we have done in the last almost 2 years now, and that is to create a system where we are supporting students using data so that students who need that support have layers and levels of support. So we don't just need to go from I'm struggling in a class to the highest need, which is almost one-on-one support. Instead, we can use this multi-tiered system of support to keep kids in their classroom and give them layers of additional support in small groups so that we can get them back into that learning environment as quickly as possible. In order to support our teachers, support our coaches with this data-driven decision-making process, we have relied heavily on our data analytics coordinator. She's done a lot of data coaching. She comes to a lot of the division meetings to talk teachers through how to use their STAR data, what to do with EWS data. An example of how we currently have used our EWS data, which is early warning system. So it's just what it means. It's early warning. It's not letting kids fall through the cracks. It's catching their struggle and responding intentionally. And so in this hybrid situation, we have used that EWS data to intentionally support students who are struggling with in-person or remote learning. And we have put together an hour tutoring session with our teachers using that data. So that's just one quick example of how we're doing that. Next slide.
For some reason, it is not responding. Give me a second.
I was going to say, no, that's not the next slide. So in addition to ensuring that we are achieving this high rigorous curriculum for all, we also know that we need to address equity. And so some of the ways, very small again, that we're doing that, you can see in those products. Most importantly is the professional development that we've been engaging in. The biggest one probably is the development of a professional learning plan that is mirrored to the logic model. It aligns to the strategic plan, but it focuses on 3 initiatives. Teachers are busy people, and to try to overwhelm them with multiple initiatives is just not realistic. And so we have streamlined our professional learning plan to 3 of the most important initiatives. We are going to work with our teachers over the next year to ensure that they have voice in this professional learning plan, so that the professional learning plan demonstrates good teaching practices. So as a teacher leader myself, as an instructional leader, I need to make sure that the professional learning I present to teachers is also differentiated, that it recognizes that all teachers aren't in the same place and don't have the same comfort level with each area. And so I'm going to be responding to that by engaging their voice, giving them opportunity, making sure that professional development isn't the drive-by or this one stop, but instead it's embedded in their job. It's throughout the school year. They can meet and learn in different ways. And so I'm really excited about this plan, and I am sure it will be coming to the board in the very near future. In addition to that, we have established an internal grading and assessment committee. So really looking at Joe Feldman is someone that you can Google him and listen to some of the things he does lots and lots of podcasts. He is a grading for equity guru. He is very committed to thinking about how we grade students and making sure that our grading practices are equitable. And so we have engaged a group of about 30+ teachers in not only his book, but I had 2 teachers that took a spring course with Mr. Feldman and were able to get personalized feedback at the end of that. We have expanded our grading and assessment committee to include 4 additional books. I won't bore you with the titles, but we just had a meeting today and it was an hour and 20-minute, very rich conversation. And so the teachers are learning a lot and will be engaging in some action research in their classrooms. And finally, in order to address equity, we really have to focus on building each leader's capacity to lead for equity. So in the 2 groups that I primarily work with, the instructional coaches and the division heads, we really felt that just assuming that everyone knows how to lead for equity is not responsible. And so we are investing in meetings twice a month with each of those groups with a specific racial equity coach who is taking us through a specific series of conversations where we will look deeply at how we interact, how we lead for equity. And on the opposite weeks, we are talking as a group and challenging one another to identify areas in the past 2 weeks where we in fact have been leading for equity and really questioning each other and being vulnerable to really talk about our struggles and our successes and focusing, as you see there, on doing this leading with authenticity. So not just using the jargon, but really leading authentically and genuinely. Next slide. Oh, is it mine?
Right. So okay, you've kind of heard how we're kind of approaching this with our teachers and with our different teams, and we want to kind of dive a little bit more deeply into one example right here. So what does this look like? Okay, and there's there's a few questions that always pop up, right, when we're talking about kind of detracking work. What does that mean? So let me give you a little bit of context from the presentation we gave a year ago, and before I dive into this science example. Number one, what are we talking about here? We currently have roughly about 50% of our students every year who are in any given subject area enrolled in an honors class, about 50% of our students. And so what we're talking about here is a totality of about 80 to 85% as we move forward are going to be enrolled in an honors level curriculum. The fear, the concerns that some folks have expressed is that, and I get it, right? The concern is, wait a second. You're playing with the curriculum that has produced some solid results for a lot of kids down the road and in previous years. And are we messing with this, right? Are we messing with the good thing? I want to share a few things about that. Number one, the most consistent finding that we saw when our teachers did the curriculum evaluation 2 years ago, the most consistent finding was that there was a high level of variability, not only between grade levels, but between courses of the exact same class. A lot of inconsistency. And if you've had multiple kids who have gone through the school, more than one kid in the same course, freshman year or sophomore year, freshman, and regardless of subject, you've seen this, right? You've seen that level of inconsistency. And so shoring up that consistency is absolutely essential. But what we also know that we need to do as we shore up that inconsistency is make sure that we are holding tightly onto a strong, positive, rigorous curriculum that is going to give all of our students access to quality experiences throughout their high school years. And so this science example gives a bit of an example of how we're approaching that. First, the movement in our science class for freshman year is from what you might have known, which is the biology sequence, honors or college prep, or the model sequence, which had the kind of earned honors work, embedded within it. Moving from that to a phys chem combined course, an honors level course of phys chem. All right, that is the freshman experience, the foundation for science learning at OPRF, beginning in the fall of 22. This was presented to the board back in November. And from there, that allows access to AP biology much earlier than it was before, and access to a wider array of dual credit and AP courses more frequently and just generally frequently throughout their high school experience. And so what I want to do, it's really hard to see on your screen. You can do this if you have this presentation. I'm going to click on it here and drag it over so you can see it in a little bit more of a blown up fashion. And hopefully that's a little better. But what you can see here is because of the shift in what freshman year science really is, that caused a much more dramatic conversation than in some other divisions about what the grades 10 through 12 would need to potentially look like. And so I referenced already this sophomore year, number one, on a biology class that is aligned to the next generation science standards. That's what NGSS stands for here. That provides a level of rigor and consistency that hasn't always been there in our courses, according to the evaluation that we had done. You also see access to AP biology during sophomore year for our students, something that a lot of high schools offer to their sophomore students, but we hadn't been able to do that till junior year previously. Now that's something that we know sophomore kids can tackle and something that we can offer sophomore year. And what you also see as you go down here is now, after those first 2 years, you're covering 3 significant strands here of science. You're covering your physics, you're covering your chemistry, and you're covering your life sciences and bio. And it gives the flight of options available to students beginning junior year. So students can now take a look at the different offerings we have, whether it's dual credit here, or we have a variety of dual credit courses in science, a regular geoscience class, but also AP courses all the way down the road, and a variety of electives as well for our students. So that is the idea in science, making sure that our science curriculum is aligned towards really positive outcomes for our kids. And I think with that, I'm going to go back to the presentation here and talk just a little bit more, quick on it, a little bit more about kind of where we're going to go. So this is kind of wrapping
Mr.
this up.
Johnson,
Oh,
can we back up 1 second in
1
science? I
second.
think it's also
Yes, go
really
ahead.
important to note that this shift that is going to be taking place in the science courses
Over here.
allows students an opportunity to obtain an AP diploma that many more affluent schools offer that Oak Park had yet to offer. And so this shift opens the door for students at Oak Park and River Forest High School to obtain this very prestigious diploma. Just want to make sure we noted that.
Yeah, thank you for.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for hitting that. So down the road, so here's what we've done so far. So obviously the freshman science curriculum was approved by the board back in November. And if you kind of go forward from there, the Common Honors curriculum also at that time was announced. Up until that point, we were talking a lot about earned honors. We were studying that. We had talked about studying that, but we announced the Common Honors back in November. And I also, that logic model that I was talking before to kind of map how we were going to move through this through the next several years was also presented in December. Also, take a look, if you wanted to dive further into this topic, another presentation just last week, we presented to our board updates on world language, which doesn't, I mean, it was almost there in all of its languages in a lot of ways with D-tracking because of how level 1 language works. But I encourage you to take a look at that by all means. And I will say one last thing about world language too, before I get off that, since I brought it up. We've had some questions about, wait a second, if my kid had taken language in 7th grade or 8th grade, does this mean that they have to come to the high school and don't, go right into level 1 English or level 1 world language? No, of course not, right? If you've taken world language elsewhere and you have that background knowledge, you would be placed, of course, in the appropriate level of world language, depending on what you've taken in the past. And here's where we are moving forward. I mentioned that I mentioned a little while ago that the academic program index review is going to be presented to the board next week. Throughout the spring and summer of 2021, our divisions are going to not only continue the presentation to our Board of Education, giving updates on our work, but we're going to continue the work itself, continue our work in designing and learning as we move forward. Now, as we go into next year, our full flight of course revisions are going to be brought to the board for approval, specifically in history, English, and world language. And then we're going to continue learning professional development throughout next school year as we prepare for full implementation in the fall of 22. So that is the overview of where we are. And it's 8:22. I don't think we did too bad. Hopefully that wasn't too long for everybody. So we will open it up from there. Okay.
Hey, Greg, this is Ross. I have a question if we're at questions. I don't know, Chuck, I'll pause if that's where we're at.
No, go ahead, Ross, that's fine.
So, Greg, just by way of background, Greg and I have talked about this, so I don't want to pretend that I'm coming out of the blue here. So, the freshman presentation to parents, Greg, that we talked about, and I'm just trying to help the community, the community here, but the freshman presentation that was just given in the winter to parents, two division heads really talked about this idea about flexibility, choice, options. You know your child better than we do. All the assessments that we look at and really try to flex up, flex down based upon extracurriculars. I feel that whole concept with these two division heads were super passionate about, and I encourage this committee to listen to the video. It seems like that's kind of being upended. We're talking about all these great things. And I think that's what I remember sitting as a parent in that auditorium, and it was a great presentation. And I was so excited to send my kid here to be able to flex up, flex down. I pushed my kid up in math. I took him down in world history because he was going to play soccer, all these great things. And I feel what we're doing with Honors for All or a singular curriculum is taking away that individuality of kids and families and their choices. And I'm struggling with how passionate those division heads are to what this looks like to me, which is a one size fits all. And I know we've had this discussion. I know you have some good answers, and I want you to reiterate those answers, but I really struggle with that as a parent. And I have a 7th grader who's going to get a different experience than my current freshman and junior. And I'll let you speak to it, but I encourage other folks to get involved in this to make sure we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, thanks, Russ. I appreciate it. And you know what, Lori might want to chime in on this experience as well, for sure. But oh, Lori, do you want to jump in first?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I apologize if you were going to go ahead. I just have one very quick thing to say.
Yeah.
I do think both of the division heads are very passionate about student choice. I don't think we can deny that. I think the timing of choice is what is critical. So by detracking, by allowing there to be one freshman curriculum, it gives all students an opportunity to see themselves, to see their potential, to experience high-level, rigorous curriculum, and then make intentional and informed choices with their family. Prior to that, they're tracked based on data, they're tracked based on perception, they're tracked based on sometimes very subjective information. By moving in this direction, we are not denying kids choice. Kids will still have choice at that sophomore level once they've had some experiences that, as an educator, I feel like is critical at that young age. Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Thanks. That's great. And I think also that I'll throw in a few things. First, I think that while there has been this choice of a college prep and an honors level experience in the past for our freshmen when they come in, that is a very specific type of choice. It is a type of choice that is two things. Number one, it's between levels, and I'm going to put that in quotes a little bit, levels between two courses. The defining feature about those levels has been, from the curriculum evaluation we did, was a great level of variability between sections, not just between college prep and honors, but between various sections of honors and various sections of college prep. It's not, and I want to be clear, our teachers came to us and they said this very clearly as they compiled with their division heads their evaluations before, that there was a sharp distinction, that there hasn't always been a very clear definition of, this is the honors thing right here. This is the college prep thing. It's something that lacked very clear definition throughout the past several years at OPRF. That's an issue. And so the consistency matters. But number two, I will tell you that the college prep is also a course that is historically problematic because of the racially identifiable results that have come from it. One of the things that I mentioned earlier in this presentation is that I presented a year ago, and Lori talked about this as well several times a year ago. The students who come into OPRF, when you take a look at just one measure, let's take a look at standardized test scores on the PSAT, they're performing within a range, all right, within a fairly narrow range. And the kids who are taking college prep classes are often very close to the kids who are doing the honors class. There's a significant amount of overlap there. And so what we're talking about is a crew of college prep students year in and year out who are in this historically kind of problematic course despite the fact that they can experience a lot of success, right, in honors classes based off of what we see. And so those are reasons why the choice that is there isn't really the same type of choice, certainly, that you saw during the later years in grades 10 through 12 in that science example, and what we're striving for in our other disciplines as we move forward as well. So there are different types of choice, and there are options that we've had in the past that are kind of rooted in problematic outcomes. We're looking to address that. We're looking to stare that straight in the face and address that. So.
Hey, Greg, thanks, and I appreciate that. I encourage everyone to listen to the video because Lori, and I'll speak to your comment about freshman and sophomore year.
Oh my God.
Ross, do you mind if I cut in here? I'm so sorry.
No.
Because I have also
had a long talk with Greg about this. I was also at the meeting last year, welcoming in the freshman families. And I was very vehemently opposed to this as a teacher and a parent, having come out of a district that was using differentiation to really flatten things. And at the beginning of tonight, one of the words I wrote down was ceiling, ? Because I found that differentiation used badly tends to make everyone the same instead of encouraging people to perform at the level of challenge that they need. What I appreciate about this model that's different from how I understood it last year, I assume there's new information now, is that we are establishing that there is not a ceiling. Speaking to Ross's note about choice, what I'm seeing here, having just filled out the freshman curriculum choices for my child who's moving in there next year, is it provides choice on the other end, it seems. I'll also speak as the parent of a child who is at a different school this year, a high school, well-ranked. Their entire sophomore curriculum is standardized across all the students. They all take exactly the same classes. It's differentiated within the class. So I've seen it done well. And I figure if they can use it, then we can do it well here if it's implemented with fidelity. My bigger question, my note is this, and what I'm not seeing mentioned. The special education department, this dovetails quite well, actually. I'd like to hear how all the faculty is getting professional development in terms of addressing the needs of students with IEPs, with 504s, but also those who are twice exceptional. There is a history, and I've experienced this directly. I have had conversations with teachers. I know parents who've also had conversations with teachers and division heads where myths about exceptional learners are pervasive. They're pervasive in IEP meetings. They're pervasive when it comes to transition meetings where colleges are talked about. As a former instructor of Triton, I know that we seem to be the pipeline for the special ed department from OPRF in quite an unfair manner. So I was hoping that someone before the end of the evening might be able to speak to how that is being addressed, because I find that to be a really critical, and it dovetails with racial equity as well. Just these myths of learners and what learners can do just seems to be pervasive without OPRF or throughout OPRF. And is that being addressed in the scheme of everything that we're hearing tonight?
I'll let Lori go, but if you want me to go at any point, Lori, I can speak to a little bit of that if you want.
You could absolutely start.
Okay. Part of that is also looking at, and this is the beautiful part of having a really strong, great administrative team that you can work very closely hand in hand with. And I think some of the conversations that we've been having ever since the start of the school year or before is that, for especially in special education, one, we have to make sure that we're having a strength-based approach that starts with making sure we know that high quality instruction results to high quality outcomes for education for kids. Meaning, let me say that differently. We can't take a deficit frame of mind approach to educating our diverse learners. We also cannot make assumptions about our students who some may think are highly intelligent, don't have an impact that their disability may cause on how they learn or how they benefit from education or how they access education. We've also heard the myth, but that student is very smart. He or she scored, they're at the 90th percentile. We don't ever want our students to stop learning and advancing. We also don't want to make the assumption that just because they scored high in an exam, that means that your teaching was great. So I want to make sure that we're talking about that as well. High quality instruction needs to also include not only all the things that Dr. Frienzer mentioned, but from a specialist perspective of special education, we have to walk into that classroom from a strength-based approach that disability doesn't mean the student cannot learn. And just because that student scored at the 90th percentile or what have you, doesn't mean that their disability doesn't impact how they learn. So there's a couple of different things that are at play with that. And we talk about that very closely across divisions in our work and partnership. And we also talk a lot about that, you know, when it comes to instruction in our diverse learners. When you mentioned twice exceptional, just from my standpoint, I heard a lot about how our students are kind of fast tracked to Triton, particularly our Black students. And so the bar gets lowered there. So we need to make sure that we pick that bar up, throw it away, start with where our students are, and advance them for Harvard, no matter what. No matter what.
And I
I'm
want to add one
I'm
thing.
just gonna point out, sorry, Greg, I just gotta say,
Go ahead.
Triton is not a bad place.
It's not a bad.
And I have said,
That's not what
and
I
so,
mean.
but I hear what you're saying.
Mhm.
We have to be so careful though, because I had someone say to me, a faculty member say to me, knowing where I taught, well, you know what kind of kids go to Triton.
Mhm.
And then I go into the classroom and I look at those kids, and your perception situation is exactly right. Because it was the students of color and it was the special ed. And then you have kids there who are like, well, why am I here? Because, you know, this is the special ed school, right? And we had a talk in community council last month about making sure that everyone can feel good about where they go, and that the community college is sometimes a really good fit for a lot of different kids. So I'm sorry to cut in on that.
No, that's a very good point. We've had those conversations as well, but we've, at the same time, like you said, we've also made sure that we keep our options open, that all of our kids can advance to, you know, top 10 universities, as well as some that may feel like this is going to be a good fit, whether it's Triton or whether it's, you know, UIC.
One thing really quick about this from a curriculum, let me give not a special education specialist answer, but from a curriculum perspective. I talked before about consistency in the curriculum and the lack of consistency we had seen in various places, and how compounding that effect is for special education students, for our special learners who are in a self-contained class, right? A class that is specifically for students with IEP needs. Because if that curriculum is not aligned to the learning standards and the expectations that we have for the curriculum at large, then that has compounding effects that are really hard to measure, but are nonetheless quite felt as that student moves through the educational system in grade sophomore, junior, and senior. So that curriculum alignment factor is empowering. It's critical that we have that in place. So no matter where you are freshman year, you know, we're talking about 80 to 85%. But yeah, we're gonna have some instructional classes for students who really need a very specific targeted support in reading, right? In our science classes or English or whatever the case is. And for those students, they're gonna get that experience, but their curriculum will be aligned to what's going on in the other classes, so that when they are ready for sophomore year and junior year, the flight of options that are available to them are gonna be more accessible, because that curriculum alignment will have an absolutely critical step. And I wanna say one more thing about a question that's in the chat. No, I'm not, because Lori wants to talk about this last topic, and then I'm going to go to the question in the chat. Go ahead.
I just would like to speak specifically to that professional learning for teachers that was asked. How are we going to support teachers in professionally learning how to support twice exceptional students, students who struggle, students who might have a 504. And I just would have to own the fact that in at least the last year and a half, a lot of our professional learning opportunities have been reactionary. We got thrown into this pandemic, COVID. It was scrambling, trying to figure out technology. And so often that has forced us into professional learning that has been reactionary. By creating this professional development strategic plan that is aligned to the logic model, we are going to be intentional about how we provide professional learning to teachers that is specific to the things that matter to them most. So I just want to make sure that we put the teachers in the light that's due them, that they just need the information. They just need the learning opportunity, and they need it more than just one presentation at the very beginning of the year. They need it embedded throughout their job, throughout the school year after year, because repetition builds our strength and our knowledge, it builds our growth. And so we are working with our teachers, working with our coaches, working with our consultants to build this professional learning plan collaboratively with our teachers. So I believe that it will reflect everything all of our students need.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Thanks. There's a, and thank you. There's a question in the chat about, it's actually about earned honors without specifically stating it. So Robert, I'm going to try to speak to that now if I can. The question is basically, I was under the impression previously, and absolutely, and correctly so, that everybody would start at the same level as a freshman, but that there would be opportunities for students to opt in or not for special projects that would, in a sense, provide access to that honors experience. And so are we still moving in that direction? And so that has been the shift. So what for a number of reasons, we found that to be a problematic process. Because, I mean, number one, I think it leads to an element of tracking within what we could otherwise call a D-track environment. And some of the research that we've seen, and some schools have done that, right? We've seen those outcomes not go where we want them to go. And number two, so what we're talking about is an honors experience for all. The differentiation now that we're talking about is not going to be in how we say, you're in my class and you're in my class, but you're getting honors credit and you're not. That's not the differentiation we're talking about. Differentiation we're going for now is in terms of the things that Lori was talking about before. You know, how we approach experience, how we approach enrichment with novels and grades, and instructional practices and things that we're using in the class. So there's still differentiation, of course. It's just not meted out with that that earned honors model. And I could talk more and more about that. So that's just a quick overview of that, Robert. But thanks for the question.
Okay. Go ahead, Ginger.
Just sort of following on this issue of differentiation. My son was lucky enough to be in a lot of co-taught classes at his time at OPRF. Yeah. So I'm wondering, is the co-teaching model going to be built up more, or is it going to disappear? I think hand in hand with that, I mean, is there talk about smaller class sizes? I mean, the work that's being done and the support that's being given teachers sounds awesome. Sounds like you guys are really doing your homework. I mean, having been a high school English teacher myself, I know that you can't be asked, it's like a mandate without the funding, right? And so it's really great that you're giving the teachers the support they're going to need to go in and really execute this plan. But I do wonder about how much we are putting on teachers' plates, and yet they still have a class of 30 kids in front of them. So is there any discussion about shrinking class sizes and also the co-taught model? Is that, like I said, going to be reinforced, or is it going away? Because I think a lot of what we talk about here with special ed is about the siloed special education program, the team kids, the instructional level classes. And I guess I'd like to hear more about what's happening with the kids that have IEPs that are in co-taught classes, or you know, even the ones that are, you know, some of my son's classes were not co-taught. What's sort of the model or the thinking going forward for those kids, and as we move toward inclusion, more inclusion, and recognizing that not all kids with autism are cognitively disabled. More of those kids are going to be in our regular ed classes, general ed classes. So what does that look like?
You want me to start, Lori?
Yes, absolutely. If you'd like to.
I won't talk about co-taught. I'll pivot to you for that. The last part of what you said was actually really, really a good segue into some of the work that we're doing. The first part is that our special education professional development plan is going to go hand in hand perfectly with our overall district job embedded coaching plan. We're going to make sure that we're working in alignment with what our district focus is, but also making sure that it's tailored to the specialist that's going to be working with the kids, and also those who are in co-taught settings or instructional settings. The other part is that we're looking to form a partnership with a very, very well-known consultant who works very closely with organizations around how do you actually skill build and life skill build with students who have neurological disorders such as autism or Asperger's. And that is something that we're going to be embarking on beginning in the fall. We are going to be meeting with her again this spring. She has been a consulting professor with Northwestern. She has been working with other school districts. She comes very, very highly regarded. And she actually has already had the experience of working with some of our students in previous years and is eager to come back. We also are making sure that, I think there was a mention of that, I think Lori mentioned it, not just giving a training, but actually just making sure that if we have two teachers in an environment such as co-taught, how do we make sure that we're maximizing the impact for learning? You got two human beings in there. Are they working in unison to make sure that the learning outcomes for students is maximized? So then I'll also pivot to Lori on the rest.
So there is no intention to not have co-taught classes at all. In fact, I believe next year there may be in some places additional co-taught classes based on student need. There's a lot to unpack in what you said in such a small amount of time, but a few things I will just let you know is that the advantage of co-taught classes, the advantage of differentiation done well, is the idea that we are going to be able to use this data to make decisions to support students' growth, that students are engaged in the process with differentiation. Differentiation is not a thing that's done to kids. It's a process in which students are engaged in looking at what skills they do and don't have in the moment, and focusing on setting a goal, looking and progress monitoring, looking at data across time to show growth over time. So really moving to this growth mindset model versus a stagnant one moment picture of who a student is, but this idea that we can see growth over time. And so the pairing of a co-teacher with a content specialist really is just that, right? As the English teacher, I'm the content specialist. As the co-teacher, my role is to really support through specialized instructional practices, supports, and resources, how to support that student, scaffold for that student so that that student can grow. So that's just a very quick and short, but just know that as a former co-teacher, a special education master's, special education is incredibly important. And that co-teaching pair is, it is incredible, near and dear to my heart. So no intention to see that go away.
And I think that the consistency issue with that too. I mean, my son had some fabulous co-teaching experiences, and then he had one or two that weren't so fabulous. So
sure.
Again, speaking to Greg's point about the consistency, I think needs to be addressed with that as well.
Absolutely. So. Absolutely.
Thanks.
I have a million things I'd like to say, and I don't even know where to begin. So here's the first thing I'll start by saying is I'm a teacher, I'm an educator. Differentiation is not new. It's been around since 1999. I read the book. We were all given PD. I don't know where OPRF has been with this since it's been around since 1999. I am a huge, passionate, my experience as a teacher has been passionate about opening doors for families and students who have come from less than. That is my whole thing, okay? I also have a very high ability student who's at OPRF. I'm here to say I am not really in support of this. Okay, and here's some of the reasons, because I'm not getting convinced yet that this is going to work. First of all, I think that I keep hearing you talk about the students who are struggling, supporting the students who are struggling, supporting the IEP students, supporting the 504 students. And I've yet not heard from one of you saying, how are you going to meet the needs of the high ability students in those kids? Because my experience, as some of you know, Mr. Johnson, is that it was not met in her freshman class. And there was no differentiation. When the criteria that showed she was successful was met, nothing went further. And I need you to talk about that for me to get on board, because it's not just about my kid, it's about high ability kids. And that was just last year. This isn't like 10 years ago. So you are saying that there's a success criteria, and you mentioned when a student demonstrates success, wonderful. Then what? Because you're going to get different, kids are going to meet that success at different points. They're going to get it after the first application of showing whether they have met the criteria, or they might need to do it after 10 applications. And that is where I'm struggling here, because somebody who's had tons of PD and differentiation, who's worked in predominantly African-American and Hispanic populations, where I see all ranges of students, where they are not detract, I always feel like the kids who are showing that potential, their needs are not getting met. There's so much focus on the kids who really need support, and as there should be. I'm not saying there isn't, but I need to see the model here. And right now, maybe I don't understand it yet. And let me say another thing. I've also been a co-taught. I've also worked with co-taught in a co-taught room. I've worked, and I see the issues around that. So I'm very familiar with what comes up. And I know that just to let me say this little story here. My concern is this might actually close some doors. I know that we're focusing on how do we open doors here, okay? Now, aside from those high ability kids, I still don't see how you're gonna differentiate for them. There's a cost issue. You're talking about equity. Here's just my experience only. So my daughter, whose needs were not met in her English her honors class last year, I had to sign her up for a course at Johns Hopkins University in order to challenge her. That was, I am below the median household income. That was inequitable for me because I had to pay for that. So just for a second, put in your head, there are families out there and who are like me, not the highest income, who may be, African-American, white, whatever, who need that little extra challenge and probably wouldn't have done it, but I at least have, I don't know. All I know is that now becomes a cost issue for them because they want to push their kids to their potential and the school isn't. So you guys have to address that, number one. Number two, as far as, okay, you keep saying the problem with college prep. Okay, well, my feeling is that there's always going to be that group of students who are demonstrating potential. And then they're in college prep, when really, honestly, they should just be pushed into the honors course and pushed and motivated. That's really what my feeling is, the answer. And as far as then you've got that group. And I feel like those students, put it this way, you've got, let's just say, like, okay, here's my background. So I came from a family of immigrants. Parents were uneducated, but super wonderful, caring, made sure we went to school, made sure we went to college, dropped us off at the door technically, and then just counted on the school to take care of us. I was a very good student, but because I didn't have that push, I pretty much landed in college prep courses. And like you, Dr. Pruitt-Adams, was told I should be a secretary. And so the problem so when I then had my child, my feeling was, no, I'm going to, because I didn't have that support network, I didn't have doors open. And that is how a lot of kids fall through. That is how they fall through. The doors aren't open for them. And so from my perspective, and I don't think mine is just alone, parents who saying, I'm going to make sure that my kid's doors open, they just feel like this is suddenly closing it on them. They want to put those kids in those honors classes because they are going to make sure that those doors open for them. And I know that's my worry here. Unless you somehow show me how you're going to make this open doors for all those kids with that really high potential. And there have been just as much research that shows that that is the key thing. You've got to focus on those kids with the potential. And right now, from what I understand, the criteria to be in the honors classes is like a SAT of like 480 or something, which really is a very low criteria. Anyway, these are just thoughts. I have a lot of other things. I don't know about your PD. I do feel like you cannot put one teacher in a room and differentiate without foreseeing difficulties. It's extremely hard work. Something will usually give, and unfortunately, it's usually the teacher's mental health. And the other thing is,
Mary.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I've said enough.
Yeah, I don't want to cut you off, but we do have to give them a chance to respond and
Absolutely.
be cognizant of our time as
Thank
well.
you.
Yeah, so Mary, thank you. Thank you. I mean, this definitely is a challenge, and I really appreciate how you framed that when you were going into it by speaking of the fact that you've seen this challenge in your own personal life, right? With your own student who was enrolled in an honors class, right, at the high school. I want to illustrate a few things about that. It is a challenge. And if there were a perfect answer that I could roll out to you and say, here's the thing, right? To say, this is going to satisfy this in a magical way, Mary, we would have done it. We know exactly what it is. But I do want to illustrate that the honors experience is something that we are deliberately holding on to as we are designing these classes. The biology class that we currently have right now, actually our curriculum period in biology as it rolls out, in some ways relies on the next generation science, but it doesn't all the way across the board. And so really doubling down on that and making sure that the curriculum is designed and taught at that honors level is something that it's the primary reason why we've shifted away from the earned honors experience to this one. You also made a comment, as you were going somewhere in the middle of what you had said, that, hey, we have some kids who are showing a lot of promise, and what we should be doing is saying, hey, this honors experience is for you, right? Let's get you in that honors experience. Yes, absolutely. That is precisely what this is designed to do. It's precisely what this is designed to do. So that when kids are ready after that freshman year to go on to a more rigorous experience, 9 through 12, they're going to have access to higher level, harder, more rigorous classes more quickly than they had previously. That really is a big part of how we want to approach this. And I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in, but maybe not. Maybe not. So.
Could I just clarify that? So you said that these courses will be taught at the honors level? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Well, I want to say thank you to Mr. Johnson, Dr. Pruitt-Adams, Lori, and Shalima. Thank you so much. What a really great presentation, and really, obviously, so many comments that everybody has and wants to be a part of. So thank you, everybody that did share. I know if you have comments, you can email me, and no, you don't email me. I'm not going to be able to help you very much, but we can get those to the right people so that you can get the answer you're looking for. So thank you to our administrative team for bringing about this. I want to say, no change is easy, and I think we have to continue to have a focus of. And it was in the comments, and I want to just check and see who said it quickly, but Corinne said it, that we got to look at the big picture. And if we really want to be a community of equity, man, we're tackling this at the real right spot. So well done, administration. You have our support, and we're gonna, there'll be challenges, but hey, we want the best for the entire community. That's why we love this community. So thank you so much for that. And I do want to just close out this evening. We're going to run maybe a couple minutes over, but before I open it up for any community announcements, It is time for us to have the nominating committee come together to nominate community council members for the next school year. So you'll be receiving an email on that. If you are a first year or if you're in the first term of your member appointment and you're in your second year, you have the option to go for another 2-year stint. So you'll be getting an email from us inviting you to that. And so we have if anybody is interested in chairing that committee for the nominating committee, raise your hand, email me, Jenny, John, or Brandy, let us know. We'd love your support in that. And it's gonna be the best way to keep moving forward is to bring more faces, more diversity, more people in this gathering. So pay attention for an email on that. Anybody have any community announcements they'd like to share?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
Next Wednesday, the board will have a discussion on the learning community achievement gap, which was a study done in OPRF back in 2003. And we'll be talking about some of the key questions tied to the data then and the data now, as well as those initiatives that were stopped and started compared to initiatives we're doing now. And then the big question is, how are we going to respond to the need, which is kind of linked to some of the comments that were in the chat. But that's going to be a board discussion during the committee of the whole meeting, which is scheduled for next Thursday, starting at 6:30. It will be facilitated by Dr. Lincoln Chandler. And we have 2 members of the African-American team. I don't want to misspell the name. We have 2 members from the original research group that will be a part of that conversation. That is Dr. Carl Spite and Dr. George Bailey. And that's at 6:30.
Excellent. Thanks, Dr. Adams. Anybody else, community announcements? All right. Well, everybody, look, we did it. 9:01. Not too bad. For a while there, it looked like it was going to go till 10. But hey, great evening. Thanks, everybody, for your input. Thanks for having a good attitude about it. And as we continue to support this great school district, this great high school, our incredible students, our staff and administration, well done, everybody. Hey, have a great month of March. Enjoy spring break. We're not going to be meeting the first week of April. We'll come back in May. So stay tuned for fun information coming up all the way through as we nominate new members and close out this school year. Can you believe it? Doesn't seem possible. So, hey, have a great month. Take care, everybody. We'll see you.
Good night.